I'm winemaker Amy LaBelle, and along with my husband, Cesar Arboleda, we offer you this behind-the-scenes sneak peek at what it's like to bring a big dream to life, a dream that took us 4,083 days to realize. Here, you'll see how we run a busy restaurant, farm, and vineyard, event center, winery, and tasting room, and how we produce the Winemaker's Kitchen culinary products, all while raising our 2 young sons. Everybody has dreams, and we hope this show inspires you and your family to create happiness, cook together, live healthy, and most of all, dream big. So today we're starting the season, and it's appropriate because we're starting in the vineyard. Our vineyard is waking up now, and it's April 1st, so it's an appropriate time for us to be pruning in the vineyard. This happens every year right around this time. It depends on what's happening with Mother Nature, but Mother Nature doesn't stop for a virus or anything else, and we still have to prune our vineyard in time, or we won't get a crop this summer, and we will have nothing good to make wine with this year. So it's really important that we stay on track, even though we've got some business closures right now because of this crazy pandemic. We are still moving forward at LaBelle and making positive things happen for our future. So I want to show you a little closer what we're doing. What is vineyard pruning? Why do we do it? Well, we have a lot of growth. You know, vines grow very vigorously during the year, and it's very important at this time of the year to prune them back to their basic. So we've got to get to 2 canes that will give us our fruit for this summer. And I want to show you a vine that's been pruned already, and then show you the actual pruning of another vine so you can see how drastic it is. It's quite something. We've got Peter and Josh out working in the vineyard today. Josh is our vineyard manager. Hi, Josh.
Hi, everybody.
And Peter is in the back row over here. We are pruning our Cayuga vineyard right now. And you can see that we've already made a bunch of cuts. And this vine is looking a little neater than, say, this one that Josh is working on now. So Josh, what's the goal here? What are we working on?
Well, all of last year's growth is evidence here of where it doesn't have this kind of rough bark on it, but these are last year's canes. So we're going to choose 4 of them, as you saw in the one that was pruned before. And then when we come back and tie these down, I'll most likely take 2 of those and cut them back for our renewal spurs, and take 2 of those 4 canes and lay them down. And on each individual one of these, if you can see, there are these nodes, and every so many inches is a segment of another one. These will actually have shoots this year, and the grapes will grow approximately about 8 to 10 inches above these nodes themselves. So this is the time of year where we're actually choosing which canes are going to be the fruiting canes, and how many nodes, therefore how many fruit sets we will have.
So this really determines our crop for the upcoming year, and we can selectively prune down or prune up our crop depending on how we want the plant to live this year. And so you can see too that some of this vine is dead. You can see this right here is a dead piece of this vine. He's either had winter damage or it's been too cold or whatever. But this one that's been pruned, you can see here, it's nice and green on the inside. And that still has some good life in it. So we'll get these all pruned up, and if you want to just pan down the row, you'll see how neat these get once we prune them up. And our hope is to show you about once a week what the progress is here in the vineyard. And you can see also, if you want to just pan over to this pile, these are all of the canes that we've cut off from last year's growth. And we'll be putting them down in the lower vineyard over the next few weeks to dry out in the sun. And you'll see down in the lower vineyard what we're setting up for, which is our annual spring event called the Burning of the Vines. And in the Burning of the Vines, we invite our community to come, throw their cares and troubles into the brush piles, burn all those troubles away, and this year you might have a few extras. Throw them on in, burn them all up, and we start our spring anew. It's like a rebirth, and that's what we like to celebrate here at the winery a little later in the spring. We'll invite you all to that hopefully soon, and we'll get that event worked out. Right now I'll say goodbye for today. I'm going to head home and make a recipe for you to share with your family. We'll say bye to Josh and Peter. Thank you so much for all your hard work.
Bye everyone, stay safe.
And I'll see you in the winemaker's kitchen shortly. And today I wanted to share with you a very easy, very affordable, and a pantry-based soup that's also vegetarian that'll really nourish your family and get everybody feeling great. The reason I'm making this today is because we were working out in the vineyard and it was a kind of chilly day, and this is a great way to warm up my family with a meal that's frankly not centered on meat. I have a bunch of meat eaters in my house, and I find it's really nice to sneak in a few vegetarian meals whenever I can. So if you serve this soup with a nice crusty bread or, you know, a grilled cheese sandwich, granted the cheese isn't vegetarian, but at least it's not meat, and I can sneak those in for my family where I can. So let me just show you this. It's super quick and easy. Let's talk first about getting everything ready. I have everything here that I need to make this recipe. That in the French terminology is called mise en place, literally everything in its place. That way I know I won't forget something or get distracted and miss an ingredient. The only thing I don't have out here measured is seasoning, and I'm going to add that to taste when the soup is done cooking. So that's mise en place. So I have here about 1.5 cups, 2 cups of spinach. You can use whatever hearty green you have on hand. If you have kale, kale is awesome in this soup too. I just don't have any today. So spinach is great. I have about 1/2 cup of carrots, onions, and celery, and I'm going to talk about that in a minute. I've got about 2 cloves of garlic crushed. You can use fresh garlic cloves if you have them and crush them up or chop them finely. I actually like the little squeeze bottles or jars of the melee garlic. I think those work great too. They're nice to have on hand for when you don't have fresh. And if you even don't have this in your house, you can find garlic powder in your pantry spice drawer, I'm sure, and that is fine. I have a 15-ounce can of cannellini beans. These are white beans. They're great in this soup, but if you don't have these, you can substitute whatever bean you have on hand. Beans are a great source of protein. They're nice and hearty. Cannellini is great in this soup, but you could do kidney, you could do black beans, navy beans, pinto beans, whatever you have on hand. Just dig in your pantry and see what you got. We have, let's see, the big can, which is about 28 ounces of crushed tomatoes. It's just crushed diced tomatoes. So canned tomatoes work fine. If you happen to have fresh tomatoes on hand, that's fine too. And in fact, sometimes when my tomatoes are starting to be not at their peak of freshness, I will chop them up and throw them in a Ziploc bag, and I throw them in my freezer so that I can use them for this kind of soup when I have time and when I'm ready. That way I can preserve them when they're maybe past their peak for putting on a sandwich or in a salad, but they're still perfect for soup. So it's a great way to stretch your food budget. And I'll share one more tip with you about that in a minute. This is 1 quart of vegetable stock that I made at home from vegetable ends. I always save my vegetable ends. What does that mean? I keep a Ziploc bag, and because I wash my carrots before I peel them, I'm able to use the carrot peels from when I use my vegetable peeler to clean up my carrot before I chop it. I've got the ends of celery here, and I've got some onion ends, right? You can do this with all your veggie ends that you have hanging around, and I do this until the bag is full, and then I boil it off, I season it, and I have a nice vegetable stock from waste, which is awesome. I hate to waste. I'm a very frugal girl. So that's how you get your vegetable ends, and I guess I'll have a couple of more to throw in right here. And like I said, because those were all washed, it's a perfectly great use for your waste vegetables. So I made this stock. It's about 1 quart, and I'm going to use it in my soup. If you want the soup to be a little more hearty and maybe have a little more body, you could certainly use a chicken stock as well, either homemade or a purchased one. But again, I said that I was going to make this recipe vegetarian, so this is a veggie stock. But you could use, I wouldn't use beef stock in this, I guess, but chicken stock would be a really yummy alternative. Okay, let's see what we got. I wanted to talk about the Mirepoix. This combination of onions, carrots, and celery is a really important part of French cooking. It's called a Mirepoix. Mirepoix is different in different cultures, but if you're talking about French cooking in particular, the Mirepoix it's the aromatic vegetables. It's the base of almost every French stew or soup. Many French recipes start with this trio. They call it the Holy Trinity. And I know that in different parts of the world, so for example, in the South, in this country, the Mirepoix in, say, Louisiana includes green bell pepper or other aromatics, but for French food in particular, this is the way to go. And I tend to cook in the French style, so it's a lot like my winemaking. I'm very much a French style winemaker as well. For whatever reason, maybe in a past life I was French, who knows. So I've got to just chop up a little bit more because I'm a little short. Again, you want about a half a cup of each, but this recipe, you know, it's not super particular. Did you see what I did there? When you're cutting celery, it's best to cut them into these long strands, so then you can just chop them up and make them roughly similar. I mean, the reason to dice up your vegetables in a way that makes them kind of similar in shape and size is so that they all cook at the same rate. If you have some big pieces and some little pieces, then they won't cook at the same rate. And then you'll have some that are undercooked and some that are overcooked, and that's a good reason. Plus, they're really pretty when they're all diced up the same. I think it's really nice. Same thing for the carrot. You want to cut a carrot in half. You're always looking for, I'm just going to add another half here. You're always looking for a flat surface from which to cut. This is the safest way to cut. And I'm going to cut this in half again. And then I'm going to just start at the end. And we're going to dice that up as well. But speed is not your goal when you're chopping. I chop a lot, so I'm kind of quick, but that's not your goal. Safety is your goal. So you want to keep your fingers out of the way. Now I have those ready to go. And last but not least, the last part of our Mirepoix is our onion. And for these, I actually want to leave them in nice long strands for the soup instead of dicing them, and they'll cook just fine. So I did this, if you cut onions into these nice long strands, they actually hold their structure pretty nice in the soup, and I like that for this particular soup for whatever reason, but you could dice these as well if you prefer. All right, into my pot, which has about a tablespoon of olive oil in it, heating already. Go the onions and all of your vegetables, your Mirepoix. All right. In that Mirepoix, I had both yellow carrots and orange carrots, and that's fine too. You can also use parsnip. I think that's a nice change up for the Mirepoix. Okay, so we're gonna let those simmer a little bit. I just need to grab a spoon. Maybe give them a quick stir. Whoops, I lost one. Let those simmer for a few minutes while you get the rest of your ingredients prepped. The reason to let these cook off on their own is so that the onions can sweat out a little bit. You're not looking to caramelize these vegetables, so you don't want it on really high. You don't want them to get brown. You just want them to begin to kind of sweat out their flavor and their aromatics, so your soup's going to be absolutely delicious. All right, now take your spinach or your kale or whatever you're using, and you just want to chop this rough. It doesn't have to be anything particular at all. Just give it a quick rough chop, and we're going to send that right into the soup to wilt it. That will start to bring out the flavors. This is like no big deal at all. You can throw it in stems and all, it's totally fine. Like I said, this soup, once it starts coming together, is an incredibly quick soup. All right. So we're going to wilt off nicely. At this point, I'm going to also put in the garlic. And there again, you don't want that burner to be really high because burnt garlic is awful. So you definitely don't want to burn your garlic. I'd say let that go for another minute or two. And then you're going to want to add your white beans. Your can of diced tomatoes. These are petite cut, which is a nice way to find them. If you can only find big cut, that's fine too. You can always puree this later, this soup, if you want partially pureed. I like it kind of chunky. I think it's yummy, especially if you're going to be dunking some bread in there. And then finally, you've got your vegetable stock. At this point, you can give it a stir. And start letting that come together. If you like to add spices at this point, if you want to add some oregano or some chili powder, if you'd like this to be a little more on the Mexican side of things, you can do that. You're definitely going to want to add salt and pepper at the end to taste, so whatever your preference is. Play around with the spices. If you want to add a little extra onion punch, feel free to add onion powder. If you like spicy food like me, you can add a dash of cayenne pepper. I don't do that for the kids because they like it mild, but if I'm having it on my own, I definitely sneak a little in. So this is a base recipe. It's a very good point to start with, and if there is anything you love and you want to add to it, feel free. So what I do now is I let that soup cook, and then I'll cut up some French bread. I'll pop that in the oven, let it toast up so that we can have some bread to dunk, and then we have a really hearty, wonderful snack or meal, and my family gets to enjoy this nourishing bowl of vitamins, really. And isn't that a great thing for us to have at this time? So I really appreciate you being here today. I hope you love this soup as much as we do. And I'll see you again in the Winemaker's Kitchen someday soon.